Roll call.
Here. Councilmember Shasta.
Here.
Councilmember Stern. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Fleur. Here. Mayor Collins.
Here. Tom, you ready for your special presentation?
Sure.
Tom Hesseldens is going to give a presentation on one-waying Mount Shasta Boulevard and Chestnut Street, and also the daylighting of Castle Creek. I hope you've worked out with them how to do this, because I have no idea.
I saw that he had it queued up for
Okay.
the map.
Well, that would be
Yeah,
just
go ahead and
swell.
show the drawing. Yes, there it is. And
Tom, I'm going to ask you to
You
cozy
should-
up to your mic.
you should have it in your agenda packet as well. This has a long history, this idea of daylighting the creek under Castle Street, turning it into a small park, taking advantage of the views of the mountain, being the center of town. Jim Parker with Mountain Runners was strongly advocating for it 30-some years ago. They did the street trees about the same time, and then worked with Pacific Power and undergrounded the power lines along that part of Castle Street. But it is controversial. So back at that time, about the most they did with the parking area itself was to put in the planting boxes with red twig dogwoods in them. The idea being that they wouldn't put in anything that was too big. That was in the middle, but at each end they did plant some liquid amber trees. And then Chris Snyder donated his services to do the small water feature. Mountain Runners put in the binoculars there so you could view the mountain from Castle Street. The city hired Merle Anderson to do a community action plan about over 20 years ago. And the idea of fully converting the parking area on Castle Street to a park was included in that action plan and adopted by the city council. Nothing happened since then. I've been working on a master plan update for the Recreation and Parks District, and in that I wanted to consider all potential parks as well as existing, to take a look at the big picture and then whittle it down to near future and more distant future actions. Also look at all the partnerships that would be involved. With this particular idea, the Rec District Board feels that it should be mentioned in the Rec District Master Plan, but that it's really a city project. It wouldn't be one that the Rec District would be the lead on, but would happily participate in if the city wants to take the lead and make something happen there. The single biggest issue from my perspective is with Ace Hardware. Something needs to be done to help them mitigate for the loss of parking immediately in front of the back store. They had tried to consolidate stores in the past. It would be to their benefit if they could have done that, but they ran into some local opposition on the architectural of the back building, and it fell through, unfortunately. But if there were a way to make that happen now, that would really help. Back in the day, the Sportsman's Den was another concern, but then they ended up getting the Bank of America building and moved, and now the Crystal Keeper's shop is there where Sportsman's Dens used to be. So parking isn't as big of an issue there. The way this relates to the one-way traffic idea is that by doing angle parking on Mount Shasta Boulevard, it could more than mitigate for the loss of parking on Castle Street. And that would be in combination with redesigning the parking lot next to Castle Street that Ace Hardware purchased and put in. Currently it's angled parking, and then there's a vacant lot next to that Beers Automotive has cars parked on, but it's otherwise a vacant lot. You can see on the drawing that if both of those were built out as double-ranked 90-degree parking. You would get quite a bit of parking very close to Castle Street. I looked at the 2-block area from Lake Street over to Alma Street with the idea of converting Mount Shasta Boulevard to angle parking. And by doing all of those things, there would be a net gain of 32 parking spaces. There would not be a net loss. The idea of one-way was considered when the city hired a traffic consultant from the Bay Area that led to the so-called smart traffic signals going in that work best when it's a 4-way flashing red light. But at the same time, that traffic consultant was recommending one-way. Business owners on Mount Shasta Boulevard opposed it because they felt that it would impact their business, not only because of more difficulty of traffic circulation, but also they felt threatened by the build out of Chestnut Street as commercial, which really it would have enhanced their business. And I think it's a package deal to look at Castle Street Park and the one-way traffic from Triangle at the south end to the Triangle at the north end. The whole thing as a package, in my opinion, as a landscape architect, would greatly enhance the downtown area. There's also the potential to go further, connecting up to Sisson Meadow. The first block is complicated, but the second block up leading to Alder Alley is really straightforward. Chuck Ryan owns 2 properties up there and is very supportive of what could be done there to daylight the creek and put in a trail. Going the other direction, there are parking issues leading down to the tracks, but it would be great to figure out a way to go under the tracks. We have a problem in this town of all these at-grade crossings over the railroad tracks. With the rec district, I've been looking at a vehicular undercrossing up at the city park, which would really help. But for pedestrians, potentially Castle Street and another one behind the shopping center are things that would help in the future for pedestrian circulation. With the current plan that's going on regarding the mobility plan in town of looking at how to make it safer for bicycles and pedestrians, this idea of going one way could enhance that. There's a 10-foot wide sidewalk on Chestnut that would be nice to share with bicycles. There's alternatives where you have angle parking on one side and parallel on the other, but you have a separation where cyclists are safer, separated from cars. The current arrangement of what's called a Class 2 bikeway, where you have a painted bikeway next to parallel parked cars, is pretty dangerous. But the city's right-of-ways are constrained width-wise. The ideal would be to be able to put in bikeways separated from angle parking and also separated from pedestrian use. So the long and short of that is it would be great to do more design work. I just took a first stab at it to show what it would look like to have the angle parking and the one-way traffic. The other thing that had to be considered in this design-wise was the alley, and Ace Hardware pointed out that when they get deliveries, they need the trucks to be able to pull through. So in the center of the drawing that I provided, you can see a double dash line, which would show how it could be designed to allow traffic to continue through. I was hoping to just have a pedestrian bridge in the middle and have the alley serve as another way for bicycle traffic to circulate through town. I should also point out that the green areas are not just lawn, they would be drive-on lawn areas, and the idea would be that you could still do the booths for the 4th of July and for the farmers market, so you wouldn't lose those functions at all. And I find it really interesting that during the 4th of July, you have Main Street or Mount Shasta Boulevard completely closed off, and you have the booths on Castle Street, and it works. Parking works. And when we used to have the cool August nights with the antique cars, they would park diagonally on Mount Shasta Boulevard, showing that diagonal parking works there. Now, another consideration has to do with these recent construction of outdoor dining decks for Sparky's and for Pipeline, which are really great. no argument at all. And initially it was just going to be for COVID, but you know, it makes sense to figure out a way to keep that going. So you lose some parking spaces because of that, but the angle parking actually works better with that sort of thing than parallel parking. Also, Tim Stearns had suggested that the front store of Ace Hardware could have rooftop dining if that whole building were converted to something else. And that, coupled with the undergrounding of power lines, you have a killer view there. Not unlike Ashland. The plaza in Ashland is a great example of where you have Ashland Creek and outdoor dining, and upstairs, down on the plaza, and then upstairs as well. They don't have the distant view of a mountain. We do. So this could actually be even more exciting than what they have in Ashland. This needs to be done in a partnership capacity, I think, Ace Hardware in particular, but also the other businesses, as well as businesses along Chestnut and Mount Shasta Boulevard. There are complications. It's not a near future fix, but if the city really wants this and everybody would work together, I think it would tremendously beautify the downtown area of Mount Shasta. So those are my thoughts. Do you have any questions or suggestions?
Tom, based on your experience, what sort of time frame would be realistic for a project like this?
I think I've always found that grants are easier to get around here than political support. And I've lost or had, 3 grants turned down that I actually got for this community in the past. And it's painful when that happens. But if the community really wanted this, I think the grant money could be obtained, and what it would involve initially would be a traffic study and CEQA, full participation, work out all the bugs, get the preliminary design, and then do follow-up grant writing for the actual construction. Depending on which grant and the size of the grant, it could be phased, or perhaps it could all be done at once for the 2-block area. The actual construction to make something like this happen is really straightforward. It has a lot more to do with getting everybody comfortable with the parking solutions and having the traffic study help back that up. And Todd has mentioned to me from his experience up in Portland that sometimes one-way traffic can be a problem. So it would be important to look at that in other communities. Bend has an area like this, San Mateo, I think Nevada City. There are lots of communities to look at where this has been done. And I think the city could learn from that. That could be part of the first grant. Basically a feasibility study combined with the traffic study, combined with CEQA, and then see where it goes from there.
So trying to put a number in terms of time frame, are we talking about 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 2 years?
If the city was ready to jump on this, and depending on the schedule of the grants that are out there now, conceivably a grant could be obtained within a year, and the feasibility study and CEQA could be done within the following year. So 2 years you could get to the point where you're ready to go after construction dollars. Then you have another delay there waiting for that grant money to come in. So 3 years, and then the construction itself, so 4 years. 4 years to completion, if everything went well.
And what I heard you say at the beginning is this proposal would actually increase parking?
By 32 spaces, just in the 2-block area, yeah.
Okay.
So there would be some land acquisition involved in this. There would be working with ACE to make it work for them. I had discussed with them, actually, I should point out that they've been receptive to talking about this for the last 20-some years, and so has John Kennedy at Sportsman's Inn. You know, instead of just saying flat out no way, they're willing to talk, but they present their concerns and we need to find solutions. I did talk to Ace Hardware about relocating at the south end of town. they don't really want to do that because they're so established here. The south end of town isn't built out yet. It has great potential for the future. But I think there's ways to make it work right here for them.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
You referenced the need for a transportation study. Did you review the one that we recently had that showed favorably for one-way streets?
Recently, in terms of the mobility planning?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah, there is one, and that just, yeah.
So the one that's bicycle and pedestrian oriented did include that?
They did,
Great.
yeah. I don't know that they touched on the daylighting aspect, but they did touch on the one-way streets, and it showed favorably for it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. I'll take a look at that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Please contact me if any of you want to explore this further. As I mentioned, the rec district doesn't want to take the lead on it, but we'll mention it in their master plan update. So one more thing I should say regarding that could help with this in the longer run is that a lot of park districts, a lot of parks at various levels, nationally, state, all the way down to local, have nonprofit organizations that back them up. So one of the things I'm proposing in the Rec District Master Plan update is the creation of such a nonprofit. The Rec District, being a governmental entity, can't be the lead on that sort of thing, but they acknowledge that if it existed, it would really help. So I'm looking at that possibility. We have a lot of nonprofits in our area, but we really don't have any one nonprofit that deals with parks and greenways. And I think that would be a big benefit to have such a nonprofit. So I'm looking at helping to create that. That in turn could be the nonprofit that could help the city move forward with something like this, and with the idea of the Mill Pond Park at the south end of town, working with the county on converting or having Lake Siskiyou be designated a county park, things like that.
Through the chair? Did you want to ask something, or?
I do.
Go ahead.
Tom, you alluded that Beers is the building and its immediate parking area next to it on the south side of the building. Is there a second lot further south side of the building that is separate from the existing Beers and their immediate parking lot? And if there are, is that different ownership?
The last I looked, it was a single ownership of the Beers building and paved area, and then the vacant lot next to that.
Right.
And then where the parking exists now, Ace had purchased that and put in that parking.
Right. Does the vacant parking lot, is that a legally designated separate lot, or is it just unpaved?
Well, on the assessor's maps, I use N-Plan Parcel Viewer. I
Yeah.
subscribe to that.
Right.
And it shows it as a legal parcel, separate.
Cool, okay.
Yeah.
That might make it easier. And have you ever talked to anybody with any idea how much that parcel would cost?
I have not, but that would be part of the feasibility study, to approach the owner and see what their willingness would be to sell, perhaps include an appraisal in the feasibility or the initial planning for
Right.
this whole project.
Great.
And another one at the same time that would be important to look at is that the city owns a lot south of Ace, behind Ace Hardware. And if Ace were to give up its outdoor area fronting on Castle Street, I thought if the city could work with Ace to allow that other area to be used as the outdoor area for Ace. And I considered that in my counting of parking spaces. So if you lose all the parking spaces in that location, it still works out that there would be a net gain of 32 spaces.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tom, you mentioned this is part of the draft Park District Master Plan, is that correct?
I did the work under the umbrella of working on the master plan update, I did a similar design for the Mill Pond Park, the improvements at Lake Siskiyou, the whole greenway network fleshed out for the whole city. They wanted the parks to be connected. I also wanted to tie into the mobility plan that Tess was referring to. So I did a lot of AutoCAD design work. And I'm glad I did, because it was an opportunity to pull together all these ideas from the last 30-some years of being involved with the city. But then in presenting that to the Rec District Board, they felt like some of this was just a little bit too far into the future, and this one in particular was so much a city issue that they want to mention it in the master plan update, but they feel that the city should take the lead.
Well, I was wondering what sort of feedback you got, whether it was positive or negative, from Park and Rec.
Oh, it was positive.
Okay.
Yeah, but, they're well aware of issues concerning parking and the adjacent businesses. But one of the reasons I looked at all of these potential parks was to get at the operations and maintenance side of the equation, because one of the key roles that the rec district can play into the future would be to, like here, to mow the lawns, to pick up trash, with the greenway network, to take care of that on an ongoing basis to the extent that off-street trails do build out with adjacent open space. Trying to get a sense of where this would all go. And as you've all seen in our community, there's a lot of enthusiasm to go out and build something, like a segment of trail, a segment of greenway, a skate park, an ice rink. But somebody's got to take care of it over the long run. So part of this master plan update is to look at that. So when I mentioned the creation of a nonprofit association to back up the rec district, part of that, it wouldn't just be to go out and chase grant money to build something. It would also be to chase a variety of funding sources to help the rec district maintain things. So with this particular project, if the city were to build this, then my understanding is the rec district would be happy to play the role of helping the city maintain it, but we'd need to make sure the money was there to pay for that.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to Todd for putting this on the agenda, and I appreciate the opportunity to put it in front of you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, once again for donating your time.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Well, I've been donating on a lot of projects over the years, but on the master plan update for the rec district, it's over 50% of my time is donated on that. So I appreciate your interest.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And thank you, Sid.
We're going to move to public comment. If you have something that you would like to comment on tonight's agenda and it's on the agenda, wait till that agenda item is up. Otherwise, if you don't, this is your time. Francis, come on down. It
Didn't think so.
It's a little illusory, but so are many things in this town.
You ain't a woofing about that, Jeff. Okay, now some of this has been heard before, but I'd like to repeat it because I haven't got any back input from this for a very long time. Maybe a little cussing from a few people, but that's that. Okay, 3 minutes. First item, I think we should get rid of some of the firebomb trees in town, which includes evergreens within the city limit. As the drought continues, as a old Forest Service guy, these are fire hazards. I think we should get rid of them. These are evergreens, particularly cedars and particularly sequoias. Item 2, no trees should be growing under the wires, especially evergreens. This includes power and phone wires. And we should be removing trees which are capable of falling over wires, such as the big firs over on Shasta Avenue. I look at those and say, whatever direction they're coming down, they're going to take out a house or take out a power line to the north or to the east. And I think we need a city ordinance to do that, to prevent people from planting trees under phone wires, or they're just going to be a problem and a maintenance headache for the city. Item 3. I think you need a sign to keep people from walking their dogs over the top of the city water supply. You see people walking dogs up there all the time, and there's nothing like dog dew to give you giardia, and it is the source of coliform in the water. I think a simple no trespassing, no dog walking sign would solve it. That can't be more than $100 to get a lot of the damned coliform out of the city water supply. It's a shallow supply. It hasn't been on the mountain for 100 years. It's only been in the ground 5 or 6 years before it hits the city faucets. Item 4. I'd like a simple latch gate for the culvert just north of the radio tower in the center of town. And the reason is because raccoons carry a lot of disease and raise a lot of hell in town, day and night, occasionally a black bear. And the raccoons use that culvert as a den. You see their tracks going in and out. You know, you'd think with 50 years of biology with the Forest Service and et cetera, that I should know what a raccoon track looks like. And this is just $100 thing. Just make a screen about that big around, simple gate latch on it so that coons can't get in. Simple. You can put a padlock on it if you want, but just, there's nothing coming down that much, but you want to keep the raccoons from going up into it.
Francis,
Okay.
before you go away, let me ask you a question. if I
One
may.
more item.
Well, your time has kind of come to the
Okay,
end, but may I ask you a question?
sure.
You said you saw dogs being walked on our public water supply.
Yes, they have been used. It has been used as such.
Where do you think that is?
I think it's over there on Howard, up Howard Road, and there's a big chain link fence around the area, and they don't go inside the chain link fence, they go around it and up the hill. And usually the dogs are not leashed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? And item 5, well, let's just say, time's up, and but that culvert is a very attractive nuisance, and I think with only $100 for that, hey, cheap solutions, cheap solutions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Francis. Anybody else in the audience like to speak during public comment? Online?
We have one hand raised, and our speaker will be Peggy Risch.
Peggy, you there?
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. It's just a short request. I know that just a few weeks ago, the city council met with the city manager to discuss and set priorities for the city for the next year. And because that meeting wasn't recorded and there are no notes that are available for that meeting, I would ask that the city council have a discussion at some meeting or possibly tonight where they actually make it more transparent what that discussion entailed and what priorities were set for the city for the coming year. And that's it. And I thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Peggy. Did you hear what she said?
The meeting that we had to set goals, there was no minute.
Oh, set goals. Got it. I just missed that part. Yeah. Anybody else with their hands up? Okay. Council and staff comments. Let's start with staff. Anybody here want to start off?
Yeah, nothing pressing at the moment, other than Matrix Consulting, who's doing our fire and police look at consolidation. They are, they pretty much wrapped up their preliminary findings. I'm just waiting to get them, to get the assent from them to get them on the council agenda.
Yeah.
A couple of things that we have. Right now, we have officers participating with the high school in a community outreach program where officers are serving drinks, hot chocolate and cider with the kids up at the high school. Last week was, we served donuts and participated in the donut eating contest. I'm proud to say that our officer did win the donut eating contest at the high school. Next week, we will be at the, there'll be a pie eating contest, and the officer's been asked to be the judge at the pie, so we're doing a bunch of stuff with the schools right now. And then on next note, we have, right now I have a part-time officer assigned to the domestic highway interdiction team. He works 1 day a week. We will be going in January to full-time officer. This Thursday in a traffic stop with Artie, they picked off 50 pounds of fentanyl at the weed rust area. So that's making progress. I'm looking forward to having a full-time officer up there so that we can get back to knowing what's going on in the community and taking good full advantage of that.
Thank you, Chief.
For the fire department, we did lift the residential burn ban on the 1st, so you will be starting to see some more smoke coming up from people's yards. If they
Like
need
mine.
To get, yeah. If they need to get a burn permit, you can go into City Hall and get a residential dooryard burn permit.
Todd, do you have anything more?
That's it.
Okay.
I just want to let everybody know that my friend and business neighbor, James Cannon of Couch Critics, has about 3 weeks left of being open before he is done, and he's doing a massive clearance sale of everything, just dumping his inventory, making deals on everything. So if you want to expand your VHS or DVD collection or need something to even play that stuff, he's got it. But it's kind of a sad time. He's been here 18 years, my neighbor, business-wise for 8 years now, and it's gonna suck not having him as my neighbor anymore. So. From what I understand, Gene and Gary Furl, who own Pepsi, are landlords, and from what I understand, they're putting their offices in there and turning their current office and warehouse into just warehouse. But that is just an understanding out of Ironclad. So,
Anybody else? Tim? Todd, any committee updates?
None.
None? Okay. We'll move on to the consent agenda. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of the minutes. October 10th, 2022, regular city council meeting. B, approval of disbursements, accounts payable October 20th, November 1st, and November 4th of this year, and total gross payroll and taxes for the period ending October 16th, 2022. C is the city manager's report, October 26th and November 9th, 2022, and D is the committee minutes from the Downtown Enhancement Advisory Committee, October 26th, 2022, the Beautification Committee, September 7th, 2022, and the Library Tax Advisory Committee on April 21st, 2022.
Move to approve consent agenda items A through D by title only.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. This is the agenda you want to speak at. Agenda item number 8 is a public hearing and the first reading of an ordinance which has no number that will be assigned at the second reading, if there is one, amending City Municipal Code Section 10-44-070 to prohibit parking on certain portions of McLeod Avenue. And there's a lot of information and details that will be presented to everybody tonight, so please do your best to just grasp all that's been rolling along here. One last thing, which this being my last meeting as mayor, I never give preambles to any agenda item ever. Until now. Primarily because I don't presume at all to ever speak for this council because I'm just one vote. But I believe, after having spent many years with this council, I'm comfortable saying that nobody on this council wants to remove parking unnecessarily. That's not anybody here's agenda. Again, not presuming to speak for anybody else, but just as us. So let us all listen to a lot of folks who've got information on what's being presented to us. And with that, Todd, would you be so kind as to introduce this to us? Oh, excuse me, Chief, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. The background on this is McLeod Avenue is an extremely narrow roadway. It is one of the main arteries that gets people in and out of our city. The problem with the narrowness of the roadway is that it's been forcing residents to park on the sidewalk, blocking the sidewalk, thus in turn forcing pedestrians to walk in the road and vice versa. To allow safe travel on this roadway, state law requires a 40-foot roadway. Our roadway, again, in this section we're talking about between Washington Boulevard and McLeod Boulevard, is a 32-foot roadway at the widest spots. Number one, the average vehicle, or average lane of the vehicle for travel is 15 feet 6 inches. The average width of a vehicle, just a regular sedan, is 6 feet, with a fire engine being close to 8, almost 9. What that does is you two-way traffic, people park on both sides of the road. If you drive up and down that road, you might have a foot or two, but with mirrors and stuff, there's a lot of people crossing over double yellow lines. So knowing that we are not within California state standards and looking into how are we going to get people in and out of the city, we started looking at the evacuation routes and what have you. So for number one, the zone from from A Street to McLeod and then going east towards McLeod up McLeod Avenue is a high severity wildland fire zone. It's red. It's the highest danger we can get. When we're looking at Zone Haven, when we're pre-planning to try to get people in and out and how we're going to evacuate should there be a problem, in the daytime, there are 5 Zone Haven zones that attach to McLeod Avenue. Those 5 zones, daytime population is estimated at 996 people with over 768 vehicles. That is a lot of people and a lot of vehicles in the daytime to try to be getting out of while we're trying to get emergency equipment into. You get one engine on that road stopped, you have no more traffic on that road. And we're talking about trying to get people up a road with smoke, flames, wind, and panic. Having taken away the feet to give people safely to get around there with cars parked on the is very hazardous and could potentially, now that we know that our roadway is not within state standards, the liability on the city is, there's a great potential for that. The other thing we looked at is the narrowness of the roadway. The residents are parking on the sidewalk, so our problem is, do we write a ticket for parking on the sidewalk and force them to park into the street where people are going around them into and causing vehicles going up to go across the double yellow lines? Or do we let them park on the sidewalks and force pedestrians into the roadway or potentially violating ADA rules for allowing handicap and that kind of stuff? On top of that, the city's been talking about developing and having owners of properties handle their sidewalks. We're parking on the sidewalks and we're creating some damage with the sidewalks. There is The feasibility we looked at, I sat down with the acting Public Works Director, Dave Torres, the fire chief. We looked at different ways, maybe one side of the street or 10 foot. Again, we just don't have the room as the road sits right now. Could there potentially in the future, with some redesign, we do have the right-of-way up there to move the sidewalks to make alcoves for people to park? That is a potential in the future, but that would take a lot of engineering and a lot of money. We're talking about just to move it the 4 feet to get us, or move it the 8 feet that we need, 4 feet on each side, to come up to state standards, would require moving all the fire hydrants, cutting down trees, redoing the gutters, the whole 9 yards. It'd be a huge undertaking just to bring it into that 40-foot roadway width. We can, with the width we have now, put in a bicycle lane, but with a bicycle lane, we would not be able to have on-street parking again. So we do have the potential where we could do a bicycle lane, but not parking. Finally, I provided all of you a little updated portion to the code, which would allow an exemption to that no parking, and that is for, if you're familiar with McLeod Avenue, when you first turn onto McLeod Avenue from Mount Shasta Boulevard, the roadway is wider at the bottom where the old B of A and the Sportsman's Den sits right now. That is actually a 40-foot roadway. The lane on the westbound side is a 24.5-foot roadway. That's from the curb to the center line, so that would allow plenty of room for parking in that section. So that would be the 185 feet where it would be allowed to park on that one side of the road. There wouldn't even no parking on the westbound side or the eastbound side going up the hill, but coming down across from, and that's in the 100 block, right on the intersection. So basically when you turn on there. So looking at it, knowing that we're not within state standards, knowing that we have a lot of people and potential for a lot of people to go in and out of that roadway, knowing that the roadway width is not conducive to getting emergency vehicles in and scared, frightened people out, and knowing that we have people parking on sidewalks, which could lead to potential other things. The cheapest, most cost-effective thing for the city to do right now to, one, protect themselves from liability, and two, to address the issue, is to put no parking, and that would be my recommendation, to have no parking from Mount Shasta Boulevard to Washington on both sides of the street, except for the exception noted.
Except for the
first block.
The exception, that 185 feet that's
Right.
noted on.
questions?
Just to be sure I'm following, when the parking is taken away, you're going to widen the street in those areas. Is that correct?
No, there's going to be no widening of the road. What it'll do is it'll allow those, right now the traffic lanes are 15 feet. So it'd make it would still be under the 16 feet, which would be the standard for a 32-foot roadway, but it would allow us to at least have our lanes close to what a 32-foot roadway would be. So there's no way to widen the road without major reconstruction of the road.
So what it comes down to is, right now, we can't get fire and emergency vehicles through there, which is obviously an issue, in a high fire area. It also sets the city up for liability if we don't address it, now that it's been clearly identified. The other issue is, in a situation where we're allowing parking on sidewalks and people are now walking out into the roadway, you're creating a pedestrian on vehicle crash hazard by not addressing that. And the other issue is that the city has been directed to address failing sidewalks by having the owners, as California state law requires, pay for those improvements. And if we're allowing a situation where we're having people park on these sidewalks, it's an undue burden on those property owners to continually have to fix those sidewalks if we're allowing it.
Yeah, I think I follow all that. I'm just wondering, with the lack of cars, that just allows the extra space to get through it for emergent, okay, thank you.
Chief, a couple questions?
Yes, sir.
And Todd, you may have to jump in on this one. To expand the width of the road on the sections being considered from 32 to 40 feet, moving fire hydrants, telephone poles, whatever, all the stuff we got to move, rough ballpark cost guess?
There's too much involved right now for me to throw something out there. It would probably be, close to $500,000.
Yeah, I was going to guess $750,000, but I didn't want to do that
Yeah.
without somebody else going first, so I just thought that. And Chief, when I was coming over here, I stopped and did measurements, and there were 5 cars that were in that section that were parked on the sidewalk at the time when I drove by here on the way over here to the meeting. Would you have any, living in this town for a long time and being on the street more than anybody, do you have any idea why those cars are parking off the street and on the sidewalk?
Well, driving up and down there, you live there, you don't want to get your car sideswiped, there's not a lot of room. And you're talking, if you got a 6-foot car and you open your door, that's 2 feet, that's 8 feet, that leaves 7 feet for a 6-foot car to go by you getting out. It's just dangerous and hazardous, so not having spoken to the residents, I won't presume, but I'm going to guess it's because it's narrow, so we're going to put it on the sidewalk so we don't have to get hit by a car.
I generally go by the rule as things do as they do because they know what they know. And that kind of made sense to me. I just thought I should ask. You're the professional in this arena. Questions? John?
Yeah, so I drive a lot through town every 3 days a week. This isn't the only narrow street in our town, so is this going to be one of the first of more studies that lead to parking prohibitions? Or is it just that this is such an important street? Is there going to be continuation of this process?
So the issue with McLeod Avenue, Lake Street, these are our primary ingress and egress routes. So once I got up there and actually physically put the tape measure to the roadway, because you can look at the roadway and go, this is really narrow. And if you look at the other roadways around it, Washington, North A&B, you're like, well, it's skinnier than them. But the issue with this roadway is that it is a main artery, it is a main evacuation egress. So if we're looking, I'm not going to be going to cul-de-sacs and looking for that, or the other neighborhoods where we've got the wider roads. But should a problem be brought up or suggested to the city and we go out and we look at it and we identify that this is a problem, I think we have a duty to address that. So we're continuing on to try to identify places where we can have the best chance for success. And this is one of those issues where we need to address it now before we become the city that, well, what happened and why was it so tragic?
Chief, I'm a little confused. If I understand correctly, the total width from curb to curb in that section is 32 feet, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said something about the standard is for 16-foot wide lanes, but I thought 12-foot wide lanes was standard.
So if you go to the Reading streets and maps, they have a 50-foot right-of-way, which is what we have there. I think I measured in the one spot at 49, but I believe it's a 50-foot right-of-way up McLeod Avenue. They have a 32-foot roadway width, which they have 16-foot traffic lanes, 0 parking, and 9-foot sidewalk easements on each side. In order to get us to a 12-foot lane with parking, we would have to have a 40-foot roadway edge.
Could we have 12-foot lanes and parking on one side of the street?
Well, the problem
that would be 24 feet of lanes, and that would leave another 8 feet.
So we have 32 feet right now, which we're again, 8 feet below state standard, so it would require a vote for the city council just to even vote for them to allow that to be a smaller roadway width than what it is. To put one side of the street, right now it's offset, it's very offset as it is. When you're coming down McLeod Avenue, you're literally coming from a 32-foot lane. That's what the westbound lane coming down McLeod from Adams to Washington. The lane itself is 32 feet. You're slamming that over into a 15-foot lane. So you've got a dog leg. Now we're going to move the center lines one way or the other. It's going to create even more of a hazard. And then which side of the street do we say, yes, you can park, and which side of the street you can't? And when we're bringing, still going to come up with the issue, even with adding the cars there, we got fire engines trying to go up, we got fire engines trying to come down, we got panicked people. What happens if we have a problem with that? So my opinion is it should be, we should go with, at the minimum, what the city of Reading has said, and that's a 32-foot roadway with no parking.
Well, I understand that, but, and I understand that's the recommendation, but again, my understanding is that many streets in California are, the lanes are 12-foot lanes, and some cities have chosen to go to something like even a 10 or 11-foot lane, which I think actually helps slow traffic. So the question is, if the lanes were 12 feet wide or even 11 feet wide, it sounds to me, at least from what I'm hearing so far, that would at least be wide enough for emergency vehicles to pass. Would not be wide enough to have parking on both sides, but might be wide enough to have parking on one side. And yes, we'd have to repaint the center line, but people on McLeod have complained about the speed, so perhaps having a bit of a jog coming down McLeod might have the positive effect also of maybe slowing some traffic.
So 12-foot, roadways are standard in a lot of locations. 11 and 10-foot lanes on collectors and arterials, they just don't work very well. Okay. I think the issue here is the geometry of the roadway and that dog leg that you've got to then pull an emergency vehicle through. That's the issue.
Could we consider, have a further look at that, of having 12-foot lanes, maybe parking only on one side, and see if it's feasible to work with that dog leg? I know we're not prepared to say yay or nay tonight, but it might be something that could be looked at.
Let me, I'll go back to there's a lot of stuff we can look at on this roadway. There's a lot of different things we can look at as a city. We can look at making the lanes different. I mean, in order to go down to your 10-foot or your 11-foot, it needs an engineering study done on it.
Well, I'm hearing the city manager say
let me finish.
we shouldn't consider 10 or 11.
But
okay.
In the meantime, before we do any of these studies and stuff, we have to address it now. And now is the problem. We have no room up there, so we're talking to put it down to this lane. I've talked to Dave about this, Torres. In order to go down to these 10-foot lanes that you're talking about.
Well, let's say 12.
Okay, well, 12-foot is the standard lane that would have 8-foot parking. Okay, if they have a 32-foot roadway, which is what we're currently dealing with, they allow a 16-foot roadway with no parking. So if you were to close this, you've got to have 8 feet for parking. That's what, right?
Right.
And we're going to say one side of the street is going to have 8-foot parking with a
with 12-foot lanes.
And that leaves how much on the other side?
Well, that would be 12-foot lanes would be 24 plus 8 would be 32.
32.
Yeah.
So
that's what we're
talking about is driving up McLeod right now. We want to get as safe as possible, and we want to eliminate that. So do we tell the people on the west side of the street that they're not allowed to park on their street, or do we tell them the right side? And two, we're still taking away room for getting vehicles in. We got to understand, we got fire trucks and people in a panic situation coming out. We're trying to mitigate that now so that we're not like Paradise where they go, oh, our shoulders were bad and we couldn't get people out. So I get what you're saying. It's something that could be looked at in the future, but for right now, my recommendation is that we address it now.
Tim, can I jump in for a second?
So if I can just interject really quickly.
Or not?
So the answer is, I think we need to take another look at it. If it's not, anything that requires us to do any maneuvers other than being able to get through there with an emergency vehicle is an absolute non-starter. Now, if there are sections of McLeod that allow us to, to provide parking on one side or the other that allows us to get an emergency vehicle in, that we need to go take a look at that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Let me just discuss my area of confusion. With a 12-foot lane on both sides, that's 24 feet, and a standard 8-foot wide parking lot on one side. On one side, that's 32 feet. At the intersection of Washington and McLeod, the center line takes a jog already because the street narrows dramatically. If you literally chose the other side to take parking out on one side, in other words, and I'm sure this council is, well, I shouldn't speak for them. I'm just fine with making a decision on what side gets no parking, but to try and preserve some parking, you literally could actually straighten out the line as it crosses, as it goes down McLeod and crosses Washington by choosing that side, the other side, to take the parking away on, and that line would actually line up straighter. The question becomes, and there's some other issues, and Todd and the chief brought these issues up. Liabilities. Even with a 12-foot roadway on both sides and parking, standard size parking on one side only, do we still have liability if there are issues as a city, which means you all, because when we get hit, we just come to you and you pay ultimately. Do we still have liability? And my understanding is we do, because the total roadway is not 40 feet, it's 32 feet. And until we can come up with half, three-quarters, or $1 million to go fix this, which again, we would come to you, we got a reasonably large exposure. Am I on target remotely?
We are, with one caveat. Nobody is going to chase the city down. If we can reasonably get emergency vehicles through there without having to make any three-point turns or any, anything like that, there has to be enough room. And if we've got enough room, who's going to chase us down? I mean, there are a lot of cities in California that have old roadways that don't meet that standard. And most jurisdictions don't have the money to just say, you know what, because California just passed an edict, we need to make all our streets 40 feet wide. It's infeasible. So yeah, it should be 40 feet wide, but if we can reasonably get an emergency vehicle through there, including a fire truck, without making any kind of unnecessary turns, and we've got the space to do it without, without clearance issues, we'll be fine.
One thing I just want to throw out there, Chief Duncan can maybe help out, is we got to think of what we're going to be dealing with. We're going to be dealing with a wildland interface. Wildfire is most likely are going to be evacuation. What type of equipment are we going to be going up that road? It's not just fire engines. It's crew carriers, it's dozer tenders, it's dozers, it's water tenders, it's vehicles that are bigger than that. We're talking low beds, we're talking low boys. So, yeah, we might make enough room with having one side of the street gets to park for a fire engine to get by, but did we now just make it where our fire dozer can't get in? So I can let Chief Duncan explain to that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm in full agreement. I think it'd be hard to pick which side. I'm trying to think, if a wildland fire was to come through, where would we put a dozer? How would a dozer turn off if we needed to send them on a side street to offload somewhere and we had parking on one of those side streets? Is that going to be a hindrance of the dozer tender or the dozer transport? So not just fire engines, but there's also very large equipment that comes with us when we run into these situations. So, and I appreciate that. I think we're trying to be proactive instead of reactive before this event happens. Hopefully it doesn't, but you know, I think it'd be hard to pick which side you'd park on, well, with that street being so narrow.
John, any? Okay. I'd like to turn it over to public comment. Let's first start with folks that are here in the audience, and then we'll go to folks online. Hey, Kathy, do we have a sign-up sheet, or is this just whoever feels brave? Look at you, come on. Can we have your name and where you live?
Absolutely. First I want to thank you for your time and the respectful way we're discussing the reality of our lives on the street. My name is Kelly Shepherd. I live at 111 McLeod. It's at the base of McLeod, down by the laundromat, and the long story short is it's a giant white house that's been split 4 ways into apartments, 2 of which have 1 allotted driveway space, and the other 2 apartments have no parking spaces, which leaves me, of the last 8 years, parking on the side of McLeod Road. I have rheumatoid arthritis, which thankfully right now is in remission. However, it's not always in remission, and I can't take bets as to when it will be in remission. And that being said, a bicycle ride all the way to Grocery Outlet to get what I need to bring it home to get it upstairs isn't feasible. And a bike lane being there to save me won't save me. And the gal that does come and rent part of the home throughout the winter into the spring every year is beyond disabled, and I'm going to respect her privacy by not giving her name. However, it's already a bit of a nightmare to get her to and from a car when it's in a snow lot. And if we were talking permanently having to remove her ability on top of my limited situation at times, I cannot imagine from a logistical standpoint how I would actually go about my life, my livelihood, and my work, which is making Reiki available for the public affordably. That being said, the biggest thing that our street faces at this moment is that the general public going through there doesn't realize it's not a highway. We have put signs in our front yards saying, drive like you love it here. We're making an active effort to make people aware that there are children, pets, pedestrians, bike riders on the street, and without having to go to the expense of something like speed bumps, the idea is maybe paint lower down what the speed limit is so that it's in the road, it's visible. Removing cars from the side of the road, I have seen from time to time, actually speeds up the traffic on the road. And so having to slow down so that they can get around the cars on the sides has been shown to be very effective at slowing down traffic. In addition to this, keeping in mind that until 4 years from now, we've got this glorious green belt by ACE and 32 more parking spots. That downtown area, ladies and gentlemen, your parking lot for all the money that comes into the city on holidays, we are your parking lot. And from a fire aspect, I know that's not great, but our street is why there is somewhere to park when everyone decides to walk downtown because Mount Shasta Boulevard's been shut off. So that the general public can come give us their time, affection, and money to help bolster us, knowing that we do receive a lot of dollars in tourism. And so with that, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Who would like to step up next?
Hi, my name is Alyssa Williamson. I live at 115 McLeod Ave, so again, near the base of the hill. So I did send in a letter, and since the main concern really is about safety on the street, I'll just bring up some new concerns that weren't in the letter. Of course, I like the idea of seeing if we can find a way to make it fit for 12 feet lanes and parking. But I also understand that the vehicles need to turn, so maybe an option is putting a red zone on the corner so emergency vehicles could get through. And really, it is difficult in that area. We park down an alley, so in the winter, it's pretty miserable parking, trying to get into our house. But I know, again, it comes down to the emergency vehicle concerns. It's not anything else that's driving this. We park on the road. We don't park on the sidewalk because we don't want to take that part of it away. So I understand that concern, because when I walk up McLeod Ave, yeah, I'm walking on the street around those cars that are parked up there. So I totally understand most of what your concern is for emergency purposes. So that's just what I'm addressing now, because my previous letter addressed the speed. I would like to see something done about the speed, since this street is brought up, but I think if we're opening it up to no parking, we really need to do something about speed, because we'll sit there and watch people go down the road at 45, 60 miles per hour on Sundays, going to church, like coming up the hill and going down. So just wanted to bring those concerns up.
Thank you. Appreciate your help. Yes, come on up.
Good evening. My name's Nicole Howell. I live at 400 McLeod at the corner of North C, which is right just west of Washington, where tonight it's been noted that the lane is much wider up top and then narrows right before pretty much our houses. And the way that traffic flows there, as people have noted, the speeds are excessive and regular and obnoxious and relentless and every day and all day. I think you're getting my point. People literally bottom out right in front of my house on a regular basis because they are going 45, 50 miles an hour, because visually the road is a lot wider up there and then it narrows right there. So I totally appreciate very much, and I want to echo what other comments have been made, that you're concerned about the safety of evacuation. Like 100% hear all of that. But I want to reiterate, and I did submit a letter and I won't go through all of that, but I really just want to reiterate that if we're concerned about safety on McLeod Avenue and the design of the roadway and how it contributes to the lack of safety for pedestrians and residents and drivers, then we need to look at this holistically. And if there are a lot of things we can do, I heard the chief say, and thank you, and we're talking about safety in general, let's look at ways that we can address both and that we can make the roadway safer for everyone every day and not just in emergency situations. There are, I think, a lot of options. As I mentioned in my letter, I've been told before that the reason there's not a stop sign on McLeod Avenue at Washington has to do with snow conditions. Again, I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't really get that. Like, there are stop signs on hills in lots of places. It really would make, like, that would do it. I don't know how much it costs to decide to put a stop sign in, but to get someone to actually have to come to a full stop before they continue down on this very narrow roadway with very little sidewalk at 45 miles an hour currently, if we could get them to stop, chances are they can't even get up to that speed by the time they've got to proceed. And then I guess the last thing I would just say that has to do with speeding and in general is, how is this going to be enforced, the parking restriction? Because there's little, I understand that there's only one officer usually on. There is little to no enforcement of the traffic laws now on McLeod Avenue. I would venture to guess that a speeding ticket hasn't been written there for years. And so I'm wondering how we're going to enforce the parking. if we don't already enforce the speeding. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and all of your energy on this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. My name's Alida Williamson. My husband and I live on North C Street. We're actually regular pedestrians on McLeod, and we regularly walk on the road for multiple reasons. One is that the sidewalk is not consistent all the way up and down McLeod on either side, and there is quite a bit of sidewalk that are trip hazards. And especially if it's for poor weather or in nighttime conditions, we're definitely walking on the road. We do not have as much of an issue with walking around vehicles because some of the vehicles parked on what would be a sidewalk is actually no sidewalk at all. It's just a piece of dirt. But listening to this, and I definitely see the issues and the hazards, I have the same questions as Mr. Stearns does. If we can't have 2 lanes that are 12-foot, 12-foot, and maybe one side of McLeod is parking, possibly the side that has the power lines or the power poles there, that they create little alcoves for cars to park on one side, and then maybe improve the sidewalk on the other side of the street so we have a really good sidewalk for pedestrians to walk on, that we do not have to walk on the street. That would possibly alleviate some of the narrowness of the road by having wider road and then creating little alcoves between the parking, between the power poles on the west side if you're facing up, coming up from Mount Shasta Boulevard, that we have parking on one side. So I just would appreciate if we could look at this a little bit, holistically, as was mentioned before, and have maybe something that works for everybody. In the case of an emergency, I do understand that, we have to have emergency vehicles, but in those cases, there's often traffic mitigation and there's one-way traffic that you would say, okay, all traffic going up McLeod is emergency vehicles, other cars coming out would have to go down Orem or something like that. But could we please work out something that would work for everybody? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to come up and speak? Yeah.
Greetings, my name is Roseanne Ware, and I also live at 111 McLeod Avenue. So most of what I was planning to say has already been spoken about. There is no parking for our household, so the only option we have is to park on the street. So if that was taken away, I have no idea where we would be able to park. Because since A and B are usually mostly filled with cars already. So we'd probably be parking several blocks away from our houses, which would be challenging in the wintertime. And I do agree with what people are talking about, the speeding down the street. And actually, I think being able to park on one side of the street may be better. My car has been sideswiped twice on McLeod, totaled once, and minor damage a second time. So I've definitely experienced difficulties as a result of people speeding up and down our street and not being careful near the parked vehicles. And even like when I'm trying to get out of my car, people like speeding by, it's like difficult to even like try to get out of your car a lot of the time when you go to park there. But yeah, so if we had that alcove where we could park. So the other issue is going to be that there's 3 of us who have vehicles that live in that building, and there's only 3 spots in that alcove. Most of the other houses do have driveways, but we are one location that does not. So would you maybe think about doing like permits for us or something like that, that there'd be permit parking in that space? So other people didn't come and take the 3 potential spots that we have to park in. So just something to think about in that regard, that, that would be the only place we'd be able to park. So if we could limit that just to the residents there, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to come up and speak? Online?
Our first speaker, and I apologize if I mispronounce your last name, Teresa and Enrico Kyoto.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Teresa.
I agree with a lot that's been said. We live on McLeod Avenue across from Nicole that just spoke about C Street. They do bottom out, but I understand the fire chiefs or the chief of police emergency situation. Now he's wanting to ban all our parking. In an emergency, I would like to know how the residents would be saved in an emergency, because our cars will not be allowed anywhere close. There is no parking in the alleyway behind us. Parking in our alleyways is prohibited already. So you're worrying about a lot of people. Alita's plan where you have alternate routes, you can go down Orm if there's an emergency. But as an emergency for the people that live on this street, we would not be able to get out. We would have to walk out if we were lucky. Then how are we going to get out of town? It is not feasible. There is no place else for us to park. In front of my house, I have one little tiny strip of sidewalk, and then between my house, I'm on the south side, between my house and my cousin's house is dirt. That is usually where we park. We do park up to the sidewalk, but as Alita and my husband and I also walk, we'll walk out in the street in the snow. They push all the snow up onto the sidewalks, and they push it all to the west, to the south, when it needs to just be removed if you're talking about safety. The biggest thing is we need to be able to park on one side for our safety also. That needs to be extremely considered. And maybe just fixing sidewalks down the opposite side of the street so then residents can have a spot to walk safely down the street, because our sidewalks are not safe. They're extremely broken up, and it doesn't have to do with the cars parking. My aunt lived here for 90-something years, and the sidewalks, as long as I've been coming up over 35 years, have never been repaired. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa.
Our next speaker is Peggy Risch.
Hi, Peggy. Can't hear you yet. Unmute yourself.
Okay, how's that?
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you for that, Jeffrey. I was just saying I don't live on the street, but I have great interest in what's happening here. And so I have a recommendation up front that the city council continue this item so that can look at some of the issues that the residents who live in the affected area can be looked at in a more holistic view, as one of the residents suggested. And I think that because we are fortunately out of fire season now, we have a little time to look at this issue in a little bit of depth. I do have a friend who lives up McLeod Avenue, and I can tell you that it's a scary thing in terms of fire evacuation. She showed me once their other route that they could use if McLeod Avenue wasn't available. And it's not even a dirt road. There's tree stumps in the way, and any vehicle that's a passenger vehicle trying to get down that alternative route would puncture its tires before they got 100 feet. So I do recognize that the fire chief here is looking at evacuation in the time of panic, in the time of fires, and the necessity of McLeod Avenue. So I really support the safety for evacuation. And I'll just stress again, I think we have a little time to consider the residents who would be affected by making drastic changes at this point. So I hope that you'll consider continuing this item for further discussion and looking at what the residents brought up who would be affected. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Peggy. I understand where you're coming from.
Our next speaker will be Vicki Gold.
Thank you so much. Very important topic. I'm very grateful that so many homeowners who live on McLeod showed up this evening to share their very, very important concerns. I think the problem with people who are physically challenged and not being able to get close to their home is really significant. I think the idea of one side of the street being for with parking makes sense. And it seems the most important thing is we really need an engineer to look at this. And as Peggy said, we have time to do it. It's not high fire season. It's extremely important. We've seen comments made about traffic in other projects, and it's always been stated that we shouldn't be discussing it without an engineer present. The important thing to me is to stress again what they've said. I have seen many, many people in town who are tourists who park on that street and on Lake Street and on Castle Street, and they don't want to, I think the idea of parking meters just makes it even more likely that they're going to park on the city streets also. I'd really like you to consider the possibility of a two-story parking area down by Parker Plaza, maybe another one in another location owned by the city or able to be purchased where people can go and they can pay for the parking without parking meters, and that will relieve some of the stress. Whether you do the one-way streets, which I really don't like, or not, I think that's a solution that will make sense. It will relieve a lot of the congestion. The other thing is, I think you could immediately, to accommodate these safety issues, do the ladder kind of marking that was mentioned, telling people to slow down, but as was stated, the exact speed limit, you can lower that immediately. And I do think a stop sign at Washington is essential. There isn't even adequate street marking so that people know that they actually should slow down at Adams and Washington. I think it's extremely important that we pay attention to what the fire chief and the police chief are saying. I want it to be safe. But there is also the possibility of eminent domain if you have to use it. And without moving the sidewalks, you could just move the curbs on both sides closer to the sidewalks so people, you could jog around the existing trees and people could park in between the trees and the power poles, thus leaving more width for the two travel lanes. But one-sided parking makes far more sense, and you could even issue a kind of sticker for people who live in the community that could put on their cars to indicate that they are allowed to be there if there were enforcement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicki. That's all the online commentary. Let's bring it back to council. Any discussion or commentary, any thoughts on Peggy Rish's continuing this? We heard a lot of different options being proposed. I, for one, would like to hear a lot more commentary on options that were brought up this evening, but Todd, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I've got a suggestion. I suggest that we table this, we engage a traffic engineer, and come back with a better approach to not only managing the speed through the area, to making sure that we can get emergency vehicles that are required through this area.
So I'll move to continue this item to the December meeting. Or is that too soon?
I know we have a Thanksgiving, right after Thanksgiving meeting.
That's probably not enough time, 2 weeks from now, right?
Probably not.
Oh, yeah, good thought.
Let me talk to a traffic engineer tomorrow to see what kind of time
All right, so
they
we'll
have.
continue this to a date in future. based on the city manager's.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming out and sharing. It's important.
Yeah, but we appreciated it.
Mayor,
It was,
we have a vote pending?
we do we ever have a second?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Agenda item number 9 is the required public meeting and request of comments for the draft EPA cleanup application of the landing, the southern dump area, and adoption of a resolution, CCR-22-36, to apply to a brownfields cleanup grant for the cleanup for the landing. Finance Director, would you please introduce this, please?
Can you hear me? No.
We cannot.
Hopefully it won't be too loud. How about now?
There you go. Yeah. You're on.
Anyway, the brownfield cleanup project has gotten to the point now where we're in the, believe it or not, the last phase of being able to finish the cleanup and assessments for the landing site. We have just finished 2 grants just in the last couple of months. One was for $200,000 with a $40,000 match. The other is a $500,000 grant without a match. In those assessments and cleanup grants, we have not been able to complete all of the removal of and are storing hazardous waste at the site at this point. In order to complete the cleanup for the landing, we will need to remove the hazardous waste that is being stored there. We will need to close off some of the wells that are there, the testing wells that the EPA and the contractor have used over time to continue to test water at those locations to see if there has been any further contamination, to make sure that there isn't leaching or any of those sorts of things. So in this particular application, which is for actually $707,740, that cleanup grant will take care of the cleanup of the piles of hazardous waste that are already there, and in moving that waste, determining if there is any further assessment needed in any of the areas that we're finishing up on, as what happened and why we're having to do this continuation was in some of the assessments that we did in this $200,000 and $500,000 grant, was they found further contamination. And when they found further contamination, it meant that they had to remove more soil, and it meant that they had to continue to test as they were moving out through the particular site, until they got to the point where the testing showed that there wasn't any further contamination. So with that, this grant deadline is November 22nd, and with this, we're actually still doing some work on the verbiage and some of those things to have that grant in on time. And this is one of the things that we have to do to meet the requirements for the application, is to bring it to council, as well as to open it up to public comment. So if there's anybody interested in having any questions or comments regarding this grant application, this would be the time to do it.
Thank you, Muriel. Any questions on the council? Go to public comment. Anybody in the audience would like to speak on this one? Online?
A public hearing? So you're opening up not just for public comment, but for a public hearing, is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you so much. So we have to actually open, so we are opening a public hearing. Is that right, Kathy? And nobody is going to speak on anything, so we're now closing the public hearing because we need to do that. And if there are no questions or comments, do I hear a motion from anybody?
I will make a motion to approve the resolution for City Council of the City of Mount Shasta to apply for the brownfields cleanup for CCR-22-36 for brownfields cleanup grant for the cleanup of the landing. By title only.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Agenda item number 10 is the discussion and possible action of the creation of a community development director position and associated salary. City manager, you want to introduce this to us, please?
You bet. So about 3 or 4 months ago, we raised the planner's salary to a level where we thought we could get somebody on board that had, 2-3 years of experience. We have posted with this rate several times, and we've gotten a couple bites from people out of state. Nobody with CEQA experience, nobody with real experience to show for it. So I've reached out to other planners, Plan West partners in Arcata and other people up here in Siskiyou County, and the consensus is, well, let me back up. With Plan West, when I talked to them, they're hiring a senior planner right now and having a hard time filling it at a top range of $91,000. So right now, our planner description is really more of a reflection of somebody, a community development director position. So I think by creating this in department head level position, raising the salary to a department head level, you've got 2 things that are going for this. One, you've got somebody getting this title that then can put in, a few years of experience up here and then maybe parlay that into something better or stay. And with the additional pay, we can attract somebody here that actually has the level of experience that is required for the complexity of the projects that we're seeing coming through. So I think we'll have a much better chance of getting a qualified, experienced applicant if we go this route.
So you are asking us simply to give thumbs up or not so that we can move forward with that, is that correct?
Correct. We're in desperate need of to get this position filled.
And I assume that it would require a future resolution to actually have a change of the job description, title, and salary. But in the meantime, the intent is to go ahead and proceed based upon our hopefully consensus vote.
I would assume that our vote would do that.
Yeah, I don't think we
Right
need a
now.
resolution to create the position.
Motions and resolutions have the same authority. Motions and resolutions have the same authority, so if you were to make that motion tonight,
Okay.
a resolution just gives us a paper trail, an ability to find
We don't know.
the decisions that were made in an easier manner.
At some point, we'll need a job description for the changes. And then all right, got it.
One question for you,
Of course.
City Manager. You're talking about the Plan West hire at 92. Of course, they've got private benefits profile, and I'm trying to make a rough equation to 85 with a public benefits package. In other words, would we be competitive at 85? Assuming that's the introduction level that's coming in.
So I don't know if I'm following that line of logic.
Let me do some math here.
Okay. Do you want me to do the math for you on the ranges for?
Well, right, at step A, you're at 42, 45 an hour, 2,000
Let me give you the
hours.
ranges here. So at the planner as it sits right now is 69,000 to just under 76,000.
Right.
Okay, and then the community development director would be between 88,000 and roughly 97,000, which is consistent with other department heads.
When somebody comes in, would they come in at step A?
It depends on their level of experience.
So you have flexibility to go anywhere in that range?
Correct.
That's all I need to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think anybody will take that lowball number?
That I can't speak for anybody else's free will, but we shall see.
I mean, I'm just saying if we're throwing out 75,000 or 97,000, not too many people are like, oh, I'll just take 75,000.
Again, the thing I need somebody with a significant level of experience, especially as relates to CEQA, somebody that can do this and stand alone, and credibly be in front of the Planning Commission to answer questions which we have been sorely lacking for a while now.
So one thing we know for sure, the current salary structure is not attracting any talent. Yeah, that's certain. So I'm not sure this will either, frankly, but it's worth a try. That's my 2 cents.
Mr. Sunshine.
On that note, do we hear from anybody in the audience? Online?
Our first speaker will be Peggy Risch.
Good evening again. Hopefully you can hear me this time. I hate to start my comments out with, can you hear me? But I've had problems tonight. So can you give me a nod?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Having kind of watched what has happened in the last year with the lack of adequate planning staff, and knowing that the first job description went out was actually asking for a combined planner part-time with weed, which was really, I didn't recommend that, but that went forward. The city had no bites. And I think it's only been a short time that job description got changed so that it would be just for a planner for Mount Shasta City. So I guess my recommendation is, what would happen if, as a first step, you actually increase the salary to something that is closer to like what Plan West is offering for a planner? I did an internet search in terms of what exactly a community development position, what it's defined as, and honestly, it sounds like someone who is really more for economic development, not necessarily someone who is screening applications for projects, being able to reject applications for projects that don't meet the criteria, because as we all know in this town, We live in the state of California, and that has CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, which has some of the highest, strictest standards for developments. So I think, again, I'll just go back that I think we need a planner who has that degree. I think that my first step would be to recommend increasing the salary, putting that job application out once again, and putting a timeline. For example, if we don't get any appropriate applicants by the end of January 2023, that then it can come back to the council to look at what is proposed here. And as you'll see on your next agenda item, you're looking at extending the contract for our consultant planner. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. Not meaning to speak for the city manager, but I'm sure we'll see him again if this doesn't work in a few months. Or not. He'll be successful. Anybody else, Kathy?
Yes. Our next speaker is Johanna.
Hi there. Good evening. Yeah, I agree with Todd. We definitely need a more senior planner, and I agree with Peggy's comments. I do think a good first step would be a higher salary. I was also going to mention that originally the position was a shared position, and what's interesting about it is the timing of that job was in the prime, job. You know, when people relocate, it was the season to relocate, back in the, August, September, maybe July timeframe. I can't remember exactly when it was posted, but now we're kind of in the winter, the holidays are setting in, and most people don't move. School starts in September for most families if they have children, and so relocation is more during that time. So just something else to consider. But I am concerned that the planner has some CEQA experience, and agree with Peggy's comments about, being able to look at projects that don't meet the criteria, because it seems like the planner we have now has been not as experienced as one would expect. And he comes from a consulting firm who, and I'm not exactly sure how much we've paid, whether it's $50,000 or $243,000 to the firm, but when you're working at a consulting firm like that, there are different levels of staff, and he seems to be like a first-year staff. And if their company is charging us all this money, it seems we should go back and renegotiate with them and ask them to, give us a credit for some of the debacles that have happened, including a special planning commission meeting that was called, that was it was very unfortunate for everyone involved from a time standpoint. And he should have senior managers and people that are supervising him, and that should actually, in these complex things, and at least initially until he gets up to speed, attend the meetings with him so that they can be there to help field and guide the responses appropriately for the needs of our city. But consulting firms will renegotiate. I think you can make a case to go back and renegotiate with them, because that's a lot of money for the taxpayers in our city. Anyway, thank you for your consideration of all of this, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Johanna.
Our next speaker is Vicki Gold.
I agree with what Peggy and Johanna just said, and I think that Kyle needs a mentor. I really understand that Todd is doing his very best to guide him, but really not having CEQA experience and vast CEQA experience is leaving the city vulnerable, and it's very frustrating for both the public and I'm sure for staff and for our representatives to have him always say, I don't know, I'll check it out, or giving him bad advice. And so it's really a hazard, and it's putting you in jeopardy. And I think I sent just now an email to both Todd and to Kathy about the California Planning and Development report that I get weekly. I don't have access to this, and I would love for the city to pay for that. It's a very cheap subscription rate, and they seem to advertise positions all the time. It goes to thousands of people and communities, and I do think a lot of people are feeling the pressure in the urban areas and wanting to relocate. And you might be surprised if you put it out with some of these major organizations that you will find somebody with experience or somebody who is almost ready to retire or has just retired that would like to come up here. It really seems to me that TRC has done some good work for the city. Maybe with regard to some portions of the general plan, I think they were misguided and that wasn't strictly their fault. But certainly we should be able to renegotiate and give them 30 days notice to find somebody who's more competent. And then again, I would suggest looking at, as you are looking at Plan West and at M-Plan as alternatives for eventually switching the consultant, because everybody seems to be disappointed in him. And he's young, he's inexperienced, but we've got major issues and it's going to get more and more complex. So thank you very much for considering that. I don't want to just see a new person hired, paying them a salary, and have that person not have CEQA experience. That would just not make sense to me. It's just more money thrown after it. And I think we really do need to make it a big effort to get a competent, well-experienced CEQA, California experienced planner. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.
Our next speaker is Betty Krieger.
Hi.
Hi, Becky. Hi, Betty.
I was going to say these comments, but things have kind of just melded into one big discussion. As you know, I sent a letter on October 23rd to the City Council and to Todd with regard to the problems at the last Planning Commission meeting, and they don't seem to have been resolved, these problems with Kyle. He definitely needs to be replaced. Now, whether we replace TRC or renegotiate the contract, they definitely need to step up to the plate and provide us with a temporary planner who is not a junior planner, who knows what they're doing, who knows CEQA. I complained to Todd back in June regarding Kyle's abysmal performance, and he agreed then, but he thought that Kyle had really stepped up and that the proof would be in the pudding once we have another meeting. Well, that was June, and we're now 5 or more months later, and the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is spoiled. I could say a lot, but it would just be seen as very controversial. I'm very disappointed that, I'll just say it again outright, that Todd made Teresa's life so miserable that she quit. And what we need to do is get Teresa back, because she was the best. She had tons of CEQA experience, and just because she disagreed with Todd, who had no experience in planning, although he said he was a planner by trade, and in an email with me, he wasn't. I've seen his resume. He was just mad that she didn't show up at 3 meetings because he wanted to fire her. I mean, that's
Betty,
basically what he said.
Betty, this isn't the topic that we're here to discuss. If you'd like to talk about...
It's about a planner.
Yeah, it isn't about the planner we used to have.
Let's talk about Juliana, who got run out of town by the speaker right now, and a bunch of other speakers. Bring her back. I mean, if you want Teresa back, we'll bring her back.
You're interfering with my time, John Redmond, and you have a habit of doing that, making sarcastic remarks. And Juliana, if you want to talk about Juliana, I have a whole lot to say about Juliana.
Betty, do you have any more comments about the TRC contract?
I think that we should, as I said before in my letter to you, that we should end the TRC contract or in an alternative replace Kyle because he's not up to the job.
Thank you, Betty. I appreciate your input. Let's bring it back to City Council.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve modifying the job title and job description of the planner, changing the job title to Community Development Director slash Principal Planner. Is that correct, or just Community?
Community Development Director.
All right, and that would include planning.
So a Community Development Director position is whatever we write that position to be. You know, I don't want to address the speaker directly, but, you know, there are plenty of Community Development Director positions that, for small towns, that focus on current planning.
So move that we change the title of planner to Community Development Director, that we change the wage scale to the scale that appears on page 52 of the agenda packet for Community Development Director. And 3, that we direct staff to present to council at a near-term future date a new job description for the position, and that we include the adjustments in our budget amendment at mid-year budget review.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And now we're going on to agenda item 11 for discussion and possible action on the amendment to the TRC Solutions contract, which my brain went over into. Todd, would you introduce that?
Sure. There is a mistake in the staff report in here. The original, when I wrote this, the only contract I could find on our drives listed a total contract amount of just under $250,000. It was an unsigned contract. So, you know, passed before I was here, and so it was a little bit of a head scratcher, so I put it out. I had Muriel pull the actual signed contract. The original amount for the entire contract was just under $50,000, so that's the correction. So let me just address some of the issues. I have concerns with our current planner that's filling in for TRC. He's gotten better with coaching, but he isn't there yet. You know, my goal here is that we're out of funds. I don't want to change horses in midstream and hire a new planning firm because it takes months for them to learn our code and get up to speed. And really all I need TRC for now is to get us through hiring a community development director, and then I would plan to sever ties with them. It's just, it's a close call. You know, I'm not happy with the performance of our current planner. He's gotten better, but he's not up to snuff yet. I've talked to senior leadership in the group. There's no such thing as renegotiating a contract with a private firm. They have their rates that they need to have for billable hours. We can ask, and I, have on certain planning jobs asked that somebody senior step in, and we can certainly do that, but then our burn rate becomes that much higher. So I think under the current circumstances, we're using TRC to get us through until we hire somebody that's competent.
All right, so for clarification, Todd, you said that the actual amount we've been billed is 50,000?
Is just under 50,000.
Okay, so we're into this for 50,000, not 250,000.
No, to just, to add money to the coffers with the idea that we're not going to expend this amount. It's really to carry us through hiring a...
No, I got that. I mean,
Yeah.
to date, we've only spent $50,000.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And following up on that, you're suggesting that we authorize a not to exceed $50,000 addendum,
Correct.
and that'll hopefully carry us through to the point where you hire the community development director.
Yes.
All right.
Question.
Yes.
Instead of having this person continue on, can we utilize this firm to help us find this new person, utilize their resources at a renegotiated amount? That's part one of my question. Part two might phase in. In the meantime, can some of these issues that are hot button topics come before council for us to handle while there's no quorum for planning commission and while we are without a planner?
So what would that look like?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Like the format?
Yeah, I mean, so...
Are you asking like we would take over doing the STRs instead of the planning commission? Is that what?
Yeah, for the, there are like the short-term rental issues for one, people that are needing to come and voice their concerns that they have us to come to,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. But in terms of a planning firm and their billable hours for their, the level of experience, that's not something they're going to renegotiate. I can pull somebody on from a higher level. It's just that we're going to have a higher burn rate and we're going to be out of that money that much quicker. My concern, again, going to a different firm that may provide us in the long run better service is just the amount of time that it takes to get them up to speed with our code and get them comfortable with our planning commission. And, do we go with somebody that's, allowing us to limp through right now, or do we go with a firm that has to start from scratch? It's a great toss-up right now, but I think TRC is in a better position to carry us through till we get a community development director.
Do you think that the city council could act as a third option to wing it until we get a planner in?
I'm not sure what that means in terms of what particular issues. I mean, I could bypass the planning commission and bring a short-term rental ordinance directly to council.
Yes. Yeah.
That would be what she means.
Yeah.
Okay. And that I can do. And I have an ordinance that I put in place in Dunsmuir that went through the vetting of the business community and the folks that don't want short-term rentals. And we had a good 6-month process, and it's pretty strong. And I've had our folks look it over, and frankly, I'd prefer that because I think we can get it passed quicker.
Yeah.
And not have to face the short-term rental moratorium expiring, and I'm just hearing that the Planning Commission doesn't have a quorum for tomorrow, so that would be great.
I think you have support on
Great.
this city council for doing exactly that.
Okay.
Further questions. So what did they develop what was developed that they were going to pursue or vote on tomorrow with respect to short-term rentals? That was on the agenda, right?
Correct. A short-term rental ordinance of, something we could put on the books that says, there's going to be a limit.
But was that similar to what Dunsmuir is? What?
So, yeah, well, there's a version that has gone before the Planning Commission twice. And it was written by a previous planner. And in reviewing that in comparison to the ordinance that was passed down in Dunsmuir, I find Dunsmuir is clearer and is fair, and it's more clean, it's more concise.
If that's all the questions, let's take it out to the audience. Would you like to speak on this? We just never know.
You just never do. I came for a reason, obviously. Hi, I'm Gentle Thunder. I live in Mount Shasta. It's great to see you all. And appreciate all your efforts and everything you're doing. What I am aware of is not the backstory, so it's all present time this evening. And I think what I'm hearing is there's wisdom to potentially cut the losses in the debacle that's been happening and create something that works with who's on board, rather than limping along, continuing to bleed out. And I really liked the wisdom of increasing the salary of the city planner. I understand you've all voted to create a new title and create a new job description and go all that route, which I was actually a little surprised at. But you may know a lot more about that than I do. So I'm aware of the need and the frustration. I can really feel that, and the process that's been in this town for a few years around trying to find the adequate person to fit the bill. And that hasn't happened for a while. And the experience, again, I'll echo many of the comments. Part of why I haven't spoken is a lot of things were covered. But having somebody who knows what they're doing and who knows the CEQA piece and who knows how to run things through more efficiently is going to make everybody's job easier and clearer, and as well as care for the public, which is why you're all serving. So thank you for struggling through this time. But I would really encourage you to consider continuing to limp along with Kyle, I understand is his name, versus calling in somebody else or not calling in someone else and finding the things that you can do in the meantime. So it's a challenging time. There's lots of restructuring going on the planet everywhere, and everybody's feeling it. So leaning in, as always, as I'm a proponent of community and working together, and that we're all in this together. There's a way through, and I haven't been here for a long time. So it's good to see all of you, and just know that I appreciate your efforts. And I appreciate those who stay on top of it. You know, when I read things that get sent to me via email, and there's people who are really involved all the time. And that's not me, but I appreciate all of you who are. And best of luck with this one. Thanks for hearing me. Blessings.
Thank you, GT.
Our first speaker online will be Peggy Risch.
Okay.
Hi.
Hopefully-
Hi, Peggy.
Can you give me the nod again?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just want you to consider, in limping along with TRC, that before you, on November 28th, you will have 2 appeals of the Planning Commission decision that were made with the planner consultant from TRC. That appeal, as you know, will be the final decision that then precedes any legal action that would be taken based on your city council decision. So, you know, I'm just putting this in reference because the city, which means you and me and all the residents, you know, have legal exposure when the consultant that will be advising you on these 2 appeals is inadequate. Now, I don't want to get into the reasons why he's inadequate, because it could be many reasons beyond his qualifications. It might become from just the pushback from the applicants for projects. It could be from input from city staff. I don't know, I'm not privy to that. I just know that you have 2 appeals before you on your next agenda. And I think it would really behoove you as city council members to really get someone who can really give you the clear, precise direction as it relates to the issues in those appeal and specifically the CEQA issues. And that's one thing that I want to say. InPlan has served us fairly well. They're pretty bright. And I do want to say that the draft that was before the Planning Commission on the short-term rental, I read it. I think it's a pretty good draft. It is not the same as the one in Dunsmere. I've been just told through the chat group that changes were made to make it fit for Mount Shasta, so that's a good thing. The fact they didn't have a quorum for this week doesn't mean they might not have a quorum next week, but whatever you do with that, those are my comments, and thank you for your patience tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
Our next speaker is Johanna.
Just to add to this agenda item, I would like to make sure that we, that we have a CEQA requirement for the job description, because a lot of what we do in the city has, is CEQA intense. And I also wanted to just state that getting a credit from a consulting firm, that does happen. I have seen that happen. And it can happen if the quality of work or, them causing us extra time and efforts and possibly potential lawsuits or whatever from not following processes and laws in our state, and our city, then they do have some responsibility for this. And I think trying to renegotiate with them and get a credit for some of the performance that has occurred is not unreasonable. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna.
Our next speaker is Betty Krieger.
Hi again.
Hi, Betty.
I agree with both Peggy and Johanna. In fact, as General Thunder was speaking about us limping along with Kyle, I was thinking about the potential for lawsuits if he continues to make inappropriate advice or lack of advice. The Planning Commission needs, as I mentioned in my letter, someone to guide them who knows about our ordinances and about CEQA, and that hasn't happened. The guidance has not been adequate. That, as the 2 previous speakers mentioned, that leaves the city open to some possible legal action, and I really don't want to have to see that happen again, given that it's currently exposed in a legal action. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty.
And our next speaker will be Vicki Gold.
I agree with what everyone has just said. I do think if you're going to allow the city to just limp along, as he said, which I think, I can understand why you would want to do that. However, I come from the medical field for over 50 years, and when we have an issue and we want to have it double checked, we send people for a second opinion. So particularly in light of what Peggy pointed out about your future appeal agenda items on the 28th, it seems to be a very good use of public funds to hire InPlan, who has worked for the city for decades, to come in and check over the work and to make commentary. I mean, this is a consultation for the consultant, but there should be no shame in that. Getting, another head or heads involved in a problem is really an admission that it's a complex situation. We don't want to make mistakes. And then you would have a little more coverage, and I think you'd get better guidance for that extra consultation. I don't think it's all that expensive, and I think they've done fairly good work. I haven't been in agreement with them on many issues, but I think overall, they have a reputation and they have some senior planners who would be available for you to use in guiding Kyle, or at least checking over the work on these appeals, particularly on any projects coming before you. I think it's extremely important to handle the short-term rental issue. And since, although this isn't the time to discuss it, I would just say I hope we might even consider adding bed and breakfasts in the residential zones. I think that there are something like 350 listed Mount Shasta rental opportunities for short-term, and many of those are B&Bs, many of them are regular short-term rentals. I'm sure very few of them are licensed. I think we only have 60 or 70 licensed. So I think if you're going to look at that, what looks to be a very reasonable ordinance, it would be good to try to address that in the future, if not as part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. That's it for online commentary. Bring it back to council.
I'd like to make a motion that that the city council appropriate sum not to exceed $50,000 for staff to be able to continue using TRC services pending transfer of planning to community development director.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda item number 12 is discussion and possible action on the request for proposals for planning services to navigate the annexation of the annexation and local agency formation commission process for 2 properties. City manager?
Sure. So annexations and navigating the LAFCO process is a specialized area of planning, and we need somebody that's done it before and can do an adequate job. So I think we've got to go out for somebody that has done this kind of work before and carry us through this process. We can wait till a community development director comes on. But they're likely not to have this kind of experience. So it's something that I think we probably need to do anyway. And I feel like we've been wasting, frankly, it's on me wasting time not getting this done. So I'd like to not lose the momentum we built on the annexation and try to move this forward.
Questions, folks?
What I understand that we are voting on is whether to approve the RFP tonight, and with the understanding that staff will go ahead and fill in the dates and complete it and get it out.
Right, and then when we get responses back, we'll kind of know what it costs too, and that would then would have to come back for approval.
Right.
Is the headline on this, Todd, that this is a different skill set going through this process than would traditionally be associated either with our current consultant planner or somebody we might hire? Either one of them, it's you want to...
You're right on that, exactly that.
Oh, okay, good. Just want to make sure I understood. Any gentle thunder? Would you care to comment on this one? By Jove, she does.
My name is Gentle Thunder, and here I am again. So, self-admittedly, I don't understand all the details of what it is you just said. I have been very interested in for a long time the annexation. of these two properties, especially the one up the street, where lots of time has been spent by everybody in this town about. So I'm not really sure if this is a step in that direction, but then there's still more needed before it like finally gets done, and that's what you're approving tonight. It's just the next step, so that it gets closer to being annexed by the city and out of the county. And that feels like an important step, and I've been continuing to watch that from afar going, why isn't that happening? Why isn't that happening? And I think you're answering some of that tonight, why that hasn't been happening. So yes, I'm excited that we're going to have some city annexation of such properties, and this is the next step. I'm learning all the time, so thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, anybody online?
Yes, our next speaker will be Vicki Gold.
Hi. As I understand it, I remember from a couple of emails with the county LAFCO planner, she put out an RFP and they obtained guidance from a very experienced person from Southern California with whom they consulted and who's provided just interim guidance to them. You might want to reach out to her and ask her who that person is and see if he'd be available, because I think he's semi-retired and charges much less than standard planners. I think he even wrote some of the LAFCO law from previous experiences with other large jurisdictions. So just a thought, she seems pretty satisfied with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. That's all. Let's bring it back to council. Comments on this, John?
I'm ready for a motion. Okay. Move to approve and request for proposal seeking specialized planning services in support of the annexation of the One Shasta property and the Orchard properties.
Second.
All those in favor?
And authorizing the RFP, staff to send out the RFP. Is that it?
Additionally, authorize the staff to send out the RFP.
By title only.
You need title only on that, Kathy? I don't think so.
No.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There are no outside meetings, and so under the future agenda items for your debut, apparently there are 2 items on here that are fraught with planning complexity.
I would ask that we move the short-term rental ordinance consideration up to the next meeting.
Next meeting.
Next.
that.
In lieu of the,
You want that soon, Joe? Great. Well, is that too soon?
That way we can have basically 2 readings, I think, before the end of the year. One in the second meeting in November and the other with the first meeting in.
The short-term rental draft is that it requires a 10-day public noticing period, so I've got to,
Good work.
it will not make it into the paper in time for that, so it's gonna have to be the December 12th meeting.
It could be in the Reading paper.
It's pushing in, it's supposed to be in the Israel General Circulation of the city.
Okay,
So-
yeah.
It's fine.
The court accepts Reading.
December.
STR. Any other agenda items you'd like to add or delete?
The problem, let me address that for a minute. The problem with putting it in the Mount Shasta Herald is it is only once a week. And we only have 2 more meetings this year. We have 1 meeting in November and we have 1 meeting in December. And then what happens in January in terms of our extension that we granted?
I've got to take a look at the moratorium and see when that expires. I don't know if it is with the beginning of the year or not.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think we've
No
got
problem.
time.
Thank you.
Anything else to add or delete?
Yes. For the next steps for the daylighting Castle Street and one-way streets project, perhaps a feasibility study get on the agenda?
Right, so following up on what Tom Hesseldens was suggesting,
Yes.
do we ask for a study, how do we describe this agenda item? Is formulating an agenda item that is going to lead towards a request for proposal for the feasibility study?
So let's talk really quickly about this. We spoke in the goal-setting workshop. I've got to, for me to be able to bring in the funds, if it's going to be grant funds, I've got to have a problem that is credible problem that I'm solving. I think I can make an argument for active transportation funds for the one-way streets on Chestnut and Mount Shasta. By saying it's an active transportation project, we're slowing traffic, we're protecting pedestrians, and we're providing protected bike lanes. I have no way of, that I can think of, and I've racked my brain on this, of coming up with a grant proposal that's saleable for Castle Street daylighting. Now, I know there's some mention that there is the potential for community funding to make this happen. But I want to have that out there for you guys. But in terms of the circulation plan, we've got a credible circulation plan in the active transportation, newly adopted active transportation plan, and it will work. I don't think it, again, will accomplish the desired goals, but if this is where council wants to go, I think we can credibly put an application together for that. And without having, we've got a study that shows it'll work.
So perhaps we can act upon seeking, how would you suggest that it be phrased in terms of authorizing staff or directing staff to seek funding for feasibility of the one-way streets, parking, et cetera?
Well, the circulation plan for the couplet,
without
which
making
includes-
reference to daylighting Castle Creek. Ken Kellogg, some years ago, said it would be a relatively simple matter to daylight the creek. It's also the sort of thing that we might be able to raise a substantial amount of money locally.
So you're saying to separate the two functions? Yeah, that makes
Right.
sense. Mm-hmm.
So I think, I can bring back next time, because we have a credible plan to chase active transportation funding for the circulation, if that's where you guys want to go.
Yeah.
And for the daylighting of Castle Creek, I think we'd have to have engineered plans and an understanding of the magnitude of cost. So that would be an engineering study for feasibility and cost. So I can bring that back as well.
Okay, separately.
At least we know what magnitude of what we're looking at.
Just as a comment about the Castle Creek, I've been in favor of this for a long, and I like the idea of being more extensive than just that one block. But the biggest thing is to get the private businesses on board and supporting this idea, and that's a lot more informal relationship building.
And if I may, when Jim Parker was trying to turn the Parker Plaza, what was then a dirt parking lot, into Parker Plaza, he privately contacted a number of community leaders and got over $100,000 to purchase and develop the property. So I think that we could potentially come up with a substantial amount of funds to assist in daylighting.
Yeah.
And it could be we
People
could,
have parking concerns, so if we're leading with the circulation plan, that's going to create more parking net.
yes,
Yeah.
they'll like that.
Yeah. But I think they want the parking close. That's-
It is connected, but for purpose of going after grant funding, we can separate it out.
Does staff have enough info for
I
us?
have one other thing that I would request. I don't think it's an agenda item, but I think it was Peggy Risch who asked that we actually put down, we provide informative minutes as to the workshop meeting that we had in terms of our goals.
I've put them together, I just haven't sent them out to all of you to take a look at first.
Okay.
One other item is that the public may or may not know that one of our most important duties as the council is to hire and direct the city manager. And I think that since we are at year end and a year into your employment, that we should set a date to do a formal employee evaluation. How we want to go about this, I think, is partially up to you, Todd. I think there's an option of it being closed, and I think we have an option of having a committee or having us all do it together.
We have used a couple of 2 or 3 different evaluation forms in the past, which I think Jody has. Maybe you haven't, Kathy. Perhaps staff can provide each of us one that you feel comfortable with. You may want to self-rate yourself as well. And then we can fill it out and each fill it out and then converse. Would that work?
Yeah, I think the most effective evaluations that I've been a part of is having a self-evaluation be a part of it and then having a collective understanding also. Yeah.
I can just do my evaluation of you right now. We need a planner that'll help you out.
Community development.
Well, we do have to have something
You
else,
have thought
but-
about secret,
But I would give
right?
2 thumbs up right now.
Can we set a date and
Anybody
time
else?
for that? Yeah, can we set a date and time for the eval before year end?
Todd, do you want this eval time set in December before the meeting, during our one council meeting in December as a closed session? We need to just set a time for this.
This could actually be held at any time. You can have it at City Hall. That might be a better space than trying to hold it here before or after a meeting.
Right, given it's holidays and we've got folks that work a lot, so.
Special meeting?
You want to make a special meeting, or do you want to do?
Closed session.
Just closed session during the December meeting?
It could be any time.
I'm saying a special meeting, we could do it in December, but as a special meeting.
My concern with trying to hold a closed session meeting in this space is you're going to have people coming and going. I recommend if you are going to hold the evaluation, you do it at City Hall.
Yeah.
You can either do it before the council
we
meeting, or you can do it on a separate day.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't recommend trying to hold it here, either before or after a regular city council.
We could do it at my bar. I'll provide the eggnog.
John, the 2 of you are the ones that have the biggest timing concerns.
There's a good chance I'm going to be out of town visiting grandchild number 4, so yeah, December's looking very family oriented, so I might not be around at all, so we'll see.
What about next couple
Well-
weeks?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
But
Before Thanksgiving?
this,
Sure.
it's grandson, so this is going to be early December, so I'm going to be gone.
How about,
Way out of the state.
are you available before Thanksgiving?
Yeah, yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
That helps. So looking at,
So next week,
I'm available one day next week.
what day
which
is
is
Monday.
Monday, the 21st?
Yes.
So Monday I am unlike usual, I will be in town.
Okay.
So I could break off route.
John?
I was really hoping to have that day off.
Can you spare a meeting, an hour?
All right, so we
Okay.
got Monday, the 21st, and now let's set a time.
Time of day. During work hours, preferably for me.
You
Anytime
saying during
between 8
work
and 5.
hours, would something like
I'm in town all morning.
3:30 or 4 o'clock, or is that too late?
No, that's fine. I can do morning too, it doesn't matter.
I'm better through 1:30, then I have to go to McLeod, so yeah.
10 a.m.?
10 a.m.
Or 11?
11 a.m.?
Well, what time do you have to go? You're 1:30? You have to go?
I will be going to McLeod.
Okay.
As part of my job.
All right, how about 10 a.m.?
10 a.m.
10 a.m.?
10 a.m., John?
10 a.m.
10 a.m. We'll at least get you half an hour.
And then we'll do forms and all that beforehand?
Yeah, can you get us
Yeah.
forms out quickly?
Something tomorrow.
Thanks. And on that note, we're adjourned.
Bye.
Good seeing you, Chief. Joe,
It's a little intimidating.
Although there is one nice thing about being the mayor,